Okay, the Chaver started the Maimer? Yeah? So there's a lot of the Gishmaki in Yonim here. It's a very Gishmaki sugya. Right, so there's two Mamarim here from Lamed Beis, David Avdi and Bayim Hasheni. They're both about Soif Mais Machshavat Tchila. If you want, you could say that the first Maimer is more about Dibur, the second Maimer is more about Maisa. So I was thinking of different Yonim to speak about, and obviously Dibur is one of the biggest Seidas here. And Mashkacha Pratis was just the Ptira of Rebbe David Shachat. And you guys have already seen, it's a famous Maisa, that the Sikha in Chelik Vav, Parshas Yisra is the Parshas Shavua. So the Sikha, the first Sikha in Chelik Vav, you know the two Sikhs in Chelik Vav, the second Sikha is Al Hein Hein, Valav Hein, Valav Lav. The first Sikha is about Chamisha Koilis. So the Sikha in Kut Sikha is for Parshas Yisra, and you see that the date is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Mitzoyer Tavshin Yud Zayin. Always Mitzoyer Yud Zayin, so it was David Shachat's Chasana. So I believe it was the Shabbos Sheva Brachas. So after davening, his father, which wasn't Mamash Lubavitcher, came to the Rebbe Ganin Atachten and asked the Rebbe if the Rebbe could verbring. He told the Rebbe that it's Chodesh Nissen is the Chodesh of the Nesiim, so the Nesiim then give Hashpoes. The Rebbe said that he didn't prepare anything. It was after Shachris, and the Rebbe wasn't planning to verbring. It wasn't Shabbos and Varchim. Those years the Rebbe went for Shabbos and Varchim. And he said, remember the exact lashon, but he said basically, I'm sure the Rebbe has what to give, and the Nesiim the Achar Mashpia, then I'm sure the Rebbe as a Nasi has what to be Mashpia. So the Rebbe said, okay, but I'll come in like 20 minutes. 20 minutes later, the Rebbe came to the Farbrengen, and the Rebbe then said the Sikha. Yes, but the Sikha was Kilu without any Achana. So here connects to the Kud of the Sikha, and the Kud of Dibur. The Sikha probably you've learned, or you know the Sikha I'm speaking about. So it's a very Yisraelistic Sikha on the Maila of Dibur. And Al Derech Zeh, our Maimer is about the Maila of Dibur. The Biurim in the Sikha and the Maimer are similar but different. But there's a Yesoid to both Biurim. The Rebbe takes them in two different directions. But the Yesoid, that's what you see here in the Rebbe's Torah, which is bits in the Rebbe's Koch, the way the Rebbe learns the whole Sugya of Dibur. Right, you see in both places, when the Rebbe actually comes to the Biur, Sayin Chelik Vav, in the Sikha, and Sai over here in David Avdi, while there's Mar Mekoimis all over the place, but when it comes to the actual Biur, it mamish seems like the Biur is the Biur Mechudesh, it's the Rebbe's Biur. And Canal, there's two way found in the Biurs, we'll get to in a moment. Fine, so the Sugya of Dibur is mamish a very Geshmakis Sugya, and Sugya Barichas and Chassidus. Right, and what makes it so fascinating is, so first of all, there's the Haskalas, understanding the Koyach Shebenefesh, the Koyach of Dibur. And as we see here in the Maimer, the Dibur basically has two extremes. It's how low it is and how high its Shoirish is. Fine, so that is not so unique because that's the whole Sugi of Seif Ma'aseh Machshava Tchila and God's Chosam B'Seifan. We have that in Malchus. The Malchus is the lowest Sphira. And yet it's Mushrish and Radwa. Right? And Betzim in the Maimer, you go through the Maimer, how many different sister sugyas you have in the Maimer, right? So you have Malchus and Zoh, you have Eretz and Shemayim, you have Oiris and Kalim. What else do you have? We went through the Maimer. What else is there here? Huh?
Mishkan.
The Mishkan is in Doim Mitzmei Medaber, yeah, etc., etc. So obviously, there's a theme here. The side of this theme is, the Chassidus looks at things this way, right? So on the one hand, Chassidus comes and says there's beferish and hierarchy, right? Because you have philosophies, right? You have different ways of looking. Some people say that hierarchy is it's sort of man-made, right? There's at some generation, everyone has different shittas how it came about, but it's not real. All these hierarchies are man-made. They were created by some oppressive regime. Everyone has different ways of understanding it, but they're not inherent. In other words, we decided there's called Damitz Me'achai Medaber, Zoh Malchus, Zohar Nekeva, Mashbiya Mekabel. This whole concept. So people come and say it's arbitrary. It just became that way, right? So on the one hand, Chassidus and Metzim Torah is very, very adamant that the hierarchy is real, right? Because the spheres, we didn't invent the spheres. It's the Eibusher spheres. And the spheres come in a seder of Chabad, Chagas Nehim, and there's Maila and Mata. Right? So we know Zmanu Mokim is not a human invention. In the Oilum Yisrael Yoinim and Ruchnis is also Zmanu Mokim. It's different than the way it's here. Right? As Chassidus explains, Zmanu Mokim, Zman is Siban Mesuvav, Mokim is higher and lower, more Ruchni, more Gili Elikos, more Bittul versus lower. So the hierarchies are real and they exist. There's Mail and there's Mata. And yet, after we take on, right, we assume that structure of the hierarchies of higher and lower, then we come and say, okay, that structure is true and it exists, and it's not only true, it's inherent, it's part of the fabric of creation, everything that we know. And yet, Soif Ma'is Machshavat Chil. In other words, Chassidus, and you see this in Chassidus B'chal, you see this in this Maimer especially, where we'll pull you to both extremes. We'll bring out how great the Maila is and how low the Mata is, or we'll bring out the flaw of Giluyim, and then we'll come and say, Aber, Dafke the Mata is Moshe Shecher. Right, so on the one hand, go with that order of Maila to Mata, and then see the Maila of Mata. So this point where the lowest becomes the highest is Moshe the highest, and ultimately becomes the highest. So you see this in multiple places. You see that in Malchus, and then as Zayar tells us, Malchus Peh. So Malchus is associated with Dibur. The classic dogma is, well, for Malchus is Dibur. And the reason why Malchus is connected with Dibur, just like Malchus is the external part of a human being, it's a koyach, it's a gemaldik koyach, right? You say someone has koyach melucha, koyach manhigus. So on the one hand, you look at him and say, wow, he's a manig. But when you break down what manig actually means, it's the most external part of a person. Now you come and say a person is a sichli, person has good midis or sophisticated emotions, you're defining the human being. Melucha is almost like it's like you learned the art of how to play around with people, right? Manipulate people, control people. There's different ifanim in melucha, but ultimately it's a very external way of just communication with others. And that's the same nekuda as Malchus, as Peh, Malchus Peh. We say it's Dibur. What's Dibur? Dibur as well. You know a person, right, someone asks you, who's this guy? Define this person. So you want to define the person and their personality, seichel, their midas, that's the mitzias. You get to know the person through their koiches and nefesh. Dibur, right, you could have someone with zero seichel, zero midas, but a gewaldike darshan. It was a Maimon Friedrich Rebbe, he's Mevar Barichis, someone that has, because in Malchus, there's Malchus that's Shaykh to Zon, there's Malchus Sheba Malchus. So there's in Dibur, there's Dibur that's connected to Seichel and Midas, and then there's Dibur, right? So there's the koyach of taking great ideas or expressing deep feelings and bringing it out in Dibur. And then there's Dibur as it is for itself. Right? You can have a person that could give lange drashas, and everyone will listen because it's a meridik koyach Dibur. And while the guy is speaking, it's like, wow, everyone's just fascinating, right? You hear a pin drop. You come a minute after the speech, was hast du gesagt? I have no idea. Because there was nothing there. There's no substance. So in a way, it sounds like hornets. What was he saying? Because in a way, that is what Dibur is. Dibur is, be'etzim, it's nothing. It's just the ability to catch someone's attention, to communicate with somebody, but there's no substance there. But that's ultimately why Dibur needs toichin behind him. Malchus, les lamigar moklum. Ultimately, what Malchus will live off is the koiches that go into it. Le'idach, you have someone with gewaldike koiches, seichel and midis, right? The other mashalim, but if he can't communicate it, he doesn't have the koich dibur, then for the sviva, for the oila, for the tzibur, it's useless, right? What can you do with this guy? I can't get anything out of it. Because ultimately our point of communication with the outside world is through dibur. So, on the one hand, Dibur is all just about communication, right? It's not about the person himself, it's how he communicates to others. Le'idach, as Chassidus explains, Dafke Dibur is Mushra Shenetzim HaNefesh. Dibur has a higher shayrish than all the other koiches. Now, the question is, what does that mean? Right? What does it mean that is Mushra in the highest in Etzim HaNefesh? So, first of all, what's the issue with that statement? The issue with that statement is that l'chayra, what makes a certain koyach closer to the nefesh, and what defines a certain koyach as further from the nefesh? Now, when I say further from the etzma nefesh, because all koyachs are nefesh, take away the nefesh, the person can't talk, can't think, can't feel, right? So it's all the nefesh acting and reacting. But how much is this thing megala the nefesh, right? How close is this? When we say close, we mean usually how much is the nefesh? Does the person himself, the deepest part of the person, who this person is, express itself in that koyach? So, as we said earlier, l'chayra dibur is on the outside, is so far, right? You hear a person yapping for an hour, you have no clue who the guy is, but you start understanding how his brain works, then you know him. What his feelings are, you know the person. So that would tell us that dibur is external, it's far, it's not the deepest part of the nefesh. On the other hand, we have proof to say that dibur comes from a very deep part of the nefesh. So usually in Chassidus, I can't say so every single Meir, but it seems usually the beer of Chassidus doesn't actually explain to us why dibur is mushrish in etzem nefesh. In other words, what's the connection between dibur and etzem nefesh? Rather, Chassidus comes and says, I have to say that dibur comes from a very deep part of the nefesh, deeper than midas and seichel. What's the proof for that? The proof is that dafke, when a person comes to a place of dibur, they get to a deeper part of themselves than when they don't reach dibur. So until now we were saying, for me, and my connection to my nefesh, seichel midas, right? Obviously, Rotz and Tanya, in seichel and midas. Where does dibur come into play? Dibur helps me communicate with the outside world. True. And that's the number one reason why people will resort to dibur. If not for communication, we would just keep our mouths shut, right? Some people speak without other people around, but it's not the regular seder in dibur. The reason we use dibur is to communicate. But once I reach that place of communicating with other people, you see something fascinating. That the seichel and the midas work on overdrive, right? I reach a depth of seichel and depth of midas that I cannot reach without dibur. Right, so here, after the Maimer brings the Maimer Ranat, anyone looked in Ranat? So probably you've learned it also in Yeshiva, you learned the first Mamar in Ranat is the Chmam Gishmaka Hemshich. And the first Mamarim, so B'chlal, the whole Hemshich of Ranat. That's if you want some Iyun background for this Maimer, you can learn the whole first Hemshich in Ranat. But it's all about Zoin Malchus, Giloyim and Etzem, but definitely the first few Mamar. So the first Maimer is one of the classic Mamar about Dibur. So there's a whole arichis. I don't know if they really read it. Just give a sikkum of what it says there. There's a very geshmaka arichis, especially you can look over here in the new print and in the Klevitz here. It's on page. In the Klevitz, it's page 25 through 29. 25 through 29 is the Klevitz. Then it goes back to 31, we look at 25 to 29. In Seichel and Midas, the numbers on the bottom of the page. What did I get the wrong page?
No, excellent.
Perfect. Oh, this got one thing right. Right, and there he explains Barichas that you see something fascinating. The dafka, when a person comes to the place of Dibur, so let's say in the world of Seichel, it will add to your Seichel in Oimek, Oirech and Roichav, and I believe he has one more category. What's the lashon there he has? I think he mentioned something called Oifen Gilu Yasef. Oifen Gilu Yasef. Right, you see that dafke when you're discussing with the chavrosa. Were you asking a shayla? Were you giving a shir? It's dafke when you speak about something that all of a sudden certain inyanim become clarified. Let's say Eirech, Reichem, and Eirech. So Eirech is, as you're speaking, you find Mishalim, you're able to bring it down in more simple terms than before. Now, where was it before you came to Dibur? In the world of Machshava. Now, Machshava is closer to the Nefesh than Dibur. We know Machshava is Levush HaMiyuchid, Dibur is already Levush HaNifra. Right? Dibur is already me communicating with somebody else. Machshava is the idea is in its most pure form, which is why I can't go from I can't take an Inyan straight to Dibur without going through Machshava, because Machshava is the first stop. Machshava is the way I process the Inyan on my own. Dibur is already communicating with others. But Dafka, when I reach Dibur, so I'm able to bring it down more. Roichav is the Inyan grows, it gets more oisius, it gets more clarity. But then more than anything, and the biggest chiddush maybe, is that there's an extra oimek. There's an oimek. That sometimes, even though you have it all figured out in your head, but you have a question and you figured it out, and now someone asks you the same shaila and you're giving them the beer, when you'll explain to somebody else, very often, you'll pick up something deeper. You'll sense something deeper here, and then, number one, by speaking, you sense that there's a depth here, and that will bring you to krichen tifer, and you'll understand it in a much better way, in a deeper way than without dibur. Now that's fascinating. Dibur, you're leaving yourself. You're going out of your nefesh. You're connecting to somebody else. It's the lowest part of your nefesh. And after then, you reach a depth in your seichel. Al derech zeh in midas. Right? So he brings that we see an eitzah when the person is, let's say, goes through kas, in a very angry place. What do? Just keep quiet. Why? Because when you speak, it takes those feelings and it's miskala, and then it can reach much deeper places. This is the negative emotions and positive emotions. Dafka's speech brings you to a place that it expands, and it brings to a much deeper place than without dibur. So they were learning Yecholzu. There was Americans also Yecholzu. You guys also you try to get a Yecholzu from the Rebbe, huh?
We'll have our own seder.
Your own seder. Whoa, that's deep. That's deep. Our own seder Yecholzu. So in Perek, I believe it's Perek, Tes or Yud, so there's a very reiche Perek there about the Indian of Dibur, of discussing, or a person discussing Nigi Levavei, discussing things with the Chaver, and he brings her in Yecholzu, he brings 3 milas that a person reaches when he discusses things with the Chaver through Dibur. The Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer brought the back of Yecholzu, so the Friedrich Rebbe adds a 4th mila, more B'shtik Ruchni. And then the Kudde is that he brings her that it connects to Daigabel Evishis Hichena. And the same thing when it comes to making achlata toiva, that ever always be mitzvah into that perek, that achlata should be done by bringing with others. When you bring something out with dibur, it's magbir, there's a whole new energy when you say it. So how is that shaykh? Darf men zagin, right? This is the way he says it in Ranat, and many other places. Right? You see that when you come to dibur, the seichel and midas are niskala. So how is it shaykh? The fee, because Dafka, when you come to Dibur, you come to a deeper place in the Nefesh. He calls it, in some places he calls it the Chachma Shebe Nefesh, the Oymek Shebe Nefesh. He has different Lashonis here. Oymek Upnimius Keich HaMaskil, Oymek Upnimius Keich HaChmas. On the bottom, towards the bottom, page 27. You reach a very deep place. So why does that place express itself in Dibur? So there's like different technical biurim that, in order to break up the idea into words and into oisius, you need a special koyach of the nefesh that allows you to take a kernel of an idea, and actually break it up and define it. So it's a koyach, certain koyach, it's a koyach of Hagbala. It's almost like the Nevorim Chassidus, the koyach Hagbala, koyach Hagvul. That's in Bligvul. It's a deeper place than koyach Bligvul. So these are the general biurim. In the Sikh and in the Maimer, the Rebbe associates Dibur. So first of all, the Rebbe goes as the derech of the Rebbe. The Rebbe doesn't go. The shayrish of Dibur is in Oyme Koyach HaChachma, or in Keser Shalamayla Michachma. We go to Etzem. Dibur is Mushish and Etzem and Nefesh. Right in the Maimer, what's the last he uses here? In Sif Dalid. Yeah, shayrish Koyach Dibur Betzem and Nefesh. It's the Rebbe's Amam, the Rebbe's Sichis, straight to the Etzem. So Dibur is Mushish and Etzem. Now, how is this Dibur Musar Shenetzim? And what does it mean it's Musar Shenetzim? Right, so the Cloud speaks of Arichas in this Maimer, the Be'etzim, right, one of the themes of the Maimer is at the end of the day, everything is Musar Shenetzim Nefesh. Right, everything is Musar Shenetzim Keser, everything is Musar Shenetzim Nefesh. It's not like I have Etzim Nefesh, and there comes Malchus and Dibur, and then there's all the other Keichs and Nefesh that somehow are implanted, or right, it's an add-on. It's like, okay, outside Etzim Nefesh, there's nothing outside Etzim Nefesh. All we got, is we got an Etzim Nefesh. And Etzim Nefesh is Noise Koiches, has all the Koiches within it. So ultimately, all the koiches come from etzem hanefesh. So what do we mean when we say that certain koiches are mushrish in the etzem, certain koiches are not mushrish in the etzem? Right? So he speaks about there's a few places in the Maimer, especially towards the end of the Maimer, that what's the pshat that it's mushrish in etzem hanefesh? So what's the lashon? Where's it in Tess?
In the brackets.
Oh, there, very good. In Sif Tess, in the brackets, the first bracket in Sif Tess, Shegam la'achri shenimshecha lemata, nirgash bo hashoyre shelo b'pnimiyas hakeser. Right, he's mitzayin also to look at, I think, the sketch was brought over here, from Zeh Hayoyim Mem Aleph, that's Sif as well. Yeah, there's a Sif, it's also brought here in the Kovitz. On page 58. Look over there, there's more Oisius there. And this is better than the Yisoid, and this will lead us to the understanding the Shaykhs of Dibur Tetzem HaNefesh. Once I understand that, at the end of the day, all spheres come from Etzem. And all Koiches HaNefesh come from Etzem. So when I say that Malchutz is Mushrish in Adlah, and when I say that Dibur is Mushrish in Etzem HaNefesh, what does it mean? What it means is, right, that it has the tchunis of the etzem. It has the tchunis of the etzem. So if the vart is that dibur has the tchunis of the etzem, so I can't just say the regular beer that, look, I see the reality is that dibur makes me smarter, and dibur makes me more emotional, and dibur makes my juices, my creative juices flowing, right? All things that dibur does. Okay, that's cool. What does it do with etzem? That would be enough to say, okay, so koyach comes from the etzem, and therefore it gives more koyach. But the whole vart here is, right, and this is the vart of the Maimer, and this is the vart that Rebbe says in multiple places, when I say it's mushrish in the etzem, means it is etzem. I could see the etzem in it, like olam hazeh is mushrish. The dafka olam hazeh comes from atzmus, creates olam hazeh, yeah? That this havas of olam hazeh can only come from atzmus. Ein aroich lechosh, not olam hazeh. The dafka, the etzem of the Eivishter is a skala in olam hazeh. How? Because dafka, something without a ilu v'siba could create something without a ilu v'siba. The Eivishter that's mitziusim yatzmusei can create a olam hazeh that has a hergesh of mitziusim yatzmusei. And what's the beer? Weiter, it's another thing that Rebbe kochs in a lot. That olam hazeh, so you're saying the olam hazeh comes from atzmus. And where does atzilus come from? And where does bria come from? And where does keser come from? From the olam higher than it, yeah, from the previous gilui. And where does that come? Ultimately, everything comes from the etzem. There's nothing exists without the Eibishter himself. It's all from the Eibishter. Elamai, the word that Elam has comes from the etzem. Drikziches in them that you see the etzem in Elam has. I don't see the etzem in Giluyim. If I care, the Giluyim don't show me etzem. Atzilus screams Gilui Alikus. I have a ilu v'siba, right? I'm here because I have a source. But etzem is all about ich bin da, because I'm here, not because there's a sheirish. Dafka Elam Hazeh screams etzem. Etzem is mitzusim etzmusei, and Elam Hazeh screams mitzusim etzmusei. So the same thing over here. To say that dibur comes from etzem, I would have to come and say dibur shreit etzem. Okay, so what does etzem shrei? And what does dibur shrei? So here are two biurim of the Rebbe. There's the biur in Chelik Vav Yisra, and there's the biur in Vodod Avdi Lamed Beis. I'm trying to think which one's deeper, which one to start with. Okay, so let's first start with the beer. This is start with the beer in Yisrael. Is the sikha brought in here or just a maramah?
Small part.
Oh, there's a from Dibur. Where? That's from Shmoy. That's Shmoy's Chelik Vav. Right. Okay, so Bechlal, I mean, it's Parshas Yisrael and Lili Nishmas Derav, so we can, you can find some time to learn the Sikha throughout all the Simchas going on in Chaf Shvat. It's a very Gishmak Sikha. So there's a difference. The difference between the two biurim is in the maskana of the beer, the final vart, but also in the build-up. And I think both are important to understand because the one you can learn the Sikha and see it's similar, but it's more important to recognize the chiluk between the two biurim. The first chiluk between the two biurim is in the transition from the other koiches, seichel midis, to dibur. In the Sicha, in Chelek Vav, Parshas Yisroi, it's an evolution. Meaning, we're saying that all the koiches express the nefesh, and in the way that etzem nefesh, but on sort of an incremental growth. Each one a bit more than the other. And then finally, dibur expresses it in ganzen. And I'll explain in a moment. Whereas in the Maimer of David Avdi, we come and say the Giluyim, Seichel, Midas, and even the higher Koiches, while they're doing great, they're not touching Etzem. And Farker, their Maila is their Chesarim in this case. And only Dibur expresses Etzem. So in our Maimer, we create much more of a divide between all the Koiches and Dibur. Whereas in the Sicha, it's a process. What does that mean? So in this Sicha, he explains the Nikud that we call a human being medaber. Right, here's the Shaila, we know there's Doimim Tzemeach Chai medaber. And the Sikhi explains different places that we see these four levels. There's Doimim Tzemeach Chai medaber B'chlal in the Bria, and then within human being, we have the Doimim Tzemeach Chai medaber. Oisias, Midas, Seichel, Dibur. Now, we call a human being medaber. Now, why is a human being called medaber? What's the mile of the human being? If I ask you, what's the mile of a human being over a behemoth? What's our mile? What makes us unique? We have brains. Right? So the chayr should be doimim tzemeach chai maskil, maven, whichever word you want to use. The chayr, our mile is seichel, and yet how do we define a human being? The entire creation is divided into four categories. Right? You have in the Sichos where the Rebbe explains really there's five categories. Doimim tzemeach chai medaber Yisrael. I don't want to mix maslul here, right? Yisrael, it's a whole. The Rebbe says Nachmer that the difference between Yisrael and Medaber is a bigger chiluk than Doimim to Medaber. Doimim to Medaber because they're all nivroim. Yisrael is boyer. Fine, that's my Muzge. So we are the great. We are the Bechira Nivroim. Oh, what's up Bechira Nivroim? That we have brains. This that human beings did everything that they did and they changed society. It's all because of the seichel that we have. So Chayr should be called maskil. Just like Tzemeach, why is Tzemeach called Tzemeach? That's Ismail over Doimim, that it grows. Why is Chai called Chai? Because that's Ismail, the Chayis. But we're called Medaber. So it's interesting. So in the Maimer of Friedrich Rebbe says like this: that why is a human being called Medaber? Because it's the Haschalas Mailas Adam. Because when you go in Koiches HaNefesh, after Medaber comes Maisa. Maisa is the Chayra also a Gvaldik Koyach, right? And the Chayra, we're talking about say Maisa Mashach Tchila, and the Malchus is Moshesh in the highest place. Maybe we should bring a Maila from Maisa. The Chayra, why are we going to Dibur? Maisa is even lower. So it's explaining says that Maisa is not really a human trait. Maisa, if I care, the Behemoths do Maisa a lot better than we do. They're all about Maisa. We have within us Koyach HaMaisa, which is better than a Koyach Behem. Where is the beginning of Koyches HaAdam? Dibur. So it's not that Dibur is Tachlis HaAdam. Dibur is Aschalas HaAdam. But the Rebbe in the Sicha says, Punkt verkehrt. Dibur is Aschalas HaAdam. Dibur is Tachlis HaAdam. Yeah. What makes a human being? Speech. Communication. The ability to communicate with others is Tachlis HaAdam. Why? So the way he says is like this. In the Lashon of the Sicha, he speaks the Lashon of Ruchnius. Pshittis. That what makes, right, we're saying that one koich is higher than another koich. So Seichel is higher than Midas. What makes Seichel higher than Midas? What makes Chachma higher than Bina? Right, so we discussed this, in Baruch Shas Anissim, and other Mamarim. What makes a koich higher than other koiches? So Chassidus Berech HaMaret, two inyan. One, what makes it higher is that it's closer to the Etzem HaNefesh. Now, what does it mean it's closer to the Etzem HaNefesh? The more it's about me, and less about the Zulas, right? The less it's about the Zulas, so it's higher. Because Etzem HaNefesh is me, myself, and I. And then there's how, in each one of the koiches, I start relating to others more and more. So you have, let's say, Tainung and Ratzin, the koiches Makifim, and their koiches Atzmin. Ratzin is, this is what I want. Why do you want? There is no why. There is nothing motivating. There's nothing from the outside that's pulling me towards it. Why do I want it? Because it's what I want. I can't explain it. It's almost we call it will, but it's more of some sort of instinct. It's like, this is what I want. I can't explain it. There is no beer. I only can't explain because I don't know how to explain it, because there is no beer. Then there's seichel. Seichel is, it's not there's something else pulling me. Seichel is rational, but ultimately seichel, it's not this is what I want. There's rules of seichel that I have to give into those rules, accept those rules, and those rules dictate which way to go. And then midis, where I'm already pulled, there are things outside of me that are motivating, that are pulling me, drawing me, and attracting me to them. And then finally, when dibur, and dibur is where I'm actually speaking to somebody else. It has to leave my mitzias. And then Ma'isa where actually Mamish goes into a davar zulas, and right now it's into a table, and the koyach stays there and goes out. Fine. So that's on the one hand what makes something more nefeshtik, hecher. But another nekuda is what makes it hecher is it's pshittis. It's because what makes something ruchni? Ruchni, when you think about gashmi versus ruchni, gashmi is rigid, it's stuck, right? Kan nimsa kan. Oh yeah, this is the. And it takes up space. Ruchni is not so limited, right? That's why ideas exist everywhere, and ideas are universal. But more than that, ideas also are interchangeable, right? The more a person's a ish sichli l'mashal, the more he's able to see things from different perspectives. So let's say seichel and midis. A person is born with certain midis, with certain teva, isha chesed, isha gvura. It's almost impossible to change your middas. It's very, very hard. This broad mamish yechidei school able to change their middas. Seichel, even though our seichel is also affected by our middas, right? We think through our middas. That's why Beis Shammai thinks in the way of chiyuv, shlila, and Beis Hillel in the way of chiyuv, in the way of chesed. But ultimately, or a person that's ish sichli, I'm able to understand things even if it's hepech my tev, and that's why bechira is associated with seichel. My choice, this I choose is I choose through my brain. Because choice means I have the ability to choose against my nature, even something that's not natural to me. How is that through seichel? Because seichel, I can understand something. You could convince me something that I'm not happy about. It doesn't connect to my nature, and yet I'm able to understand. Right? So in different klichas and nefesh, a person is able to be mafshet himself from a certain teva. So comes the Rebbe and says the ultimate pshittus that you find by a person is in dibur. So here is interesting, right? Because in the regular Seder, when we speak about what's closer to the nefesh, about what's more me, and where I'm more affected by the outside, so dibur is on the lowest rung. So dibur, midis, moichin, etc., etc. Ratzin, tainuk. But if the vart of what's more nefesh, what's more etzma nefesh, by what's more pshittis, what's more undefined, then dibur is the most undefined part of a human being. Why? Because dibur says, I can leave my comfort zone, I can leave my box, and relate and connect with somebody else. You have people that struggle with communication. So the one they could come and say, the person's tachlis, you could say about this guy, he's tachlis hashlemus. Right? He has seichel, he has midis, he has adam hashalim, elamai, he struggles with communication. He needs some speech therapy, whatever, it's such a low koyach, right? And the guy's a geek. He's a genius. He's a geek. What's a geek? He doesn't communicate with others because he's higher than everybody else. But there's a flip side to it. He might be a genius and he might be a very sophisticated midis, but he's locked in. He's stuck. He's stuck in his own narrative. He can't get out of his own head. Dibur is the ability to connect to others on their terms, right? Not just to go and yell at somebody. Dibur is all about communication. You connect to others on their terms. So Rebbe says, this dibur, this koyach, to get out of my own skin, to completely break through all walls that I have and connect to other people, comes from etzem nefesh. Why is that etzem nefesh? So the lashon in the sikha is the shayrish from it's the end of Sif Yud in the sikha in Yisrael. The shayrish from koyach hadibur is in azam vayichin ar the nefesh who says nidakin shum agdara afilo nid divas telt up emunem zulas. A person can, right? The person saying this guy's open-minded. He's able to change his mind. He's able to accept new ideas. He's able to, but ultimately, it's in his own head. It has to ultimately make sense to me. I have such a good head that I could understand things that, even though people that they thought something for many years and now they're able to change their mind. Not just because they're flip-flops, because they're able to reach very deep ideas. And maybe they can even play around with their feelings. But it's all in their own little space. Dibur is to go completely out of any definitions, right? And any limits and any boundaries that I have to break through that and all of a sudden, the most classic, what's the main chiluk between me and somebody else? Not just the fact that our brains are different, our feelings are different. I'm me and you're you. But then there's mitzad etzem hanefesh, the deepest part of a person. At that space, it's so not mugder and not mugbal that even the basic chiluk that there's me and there's you also doesn't exist there. That's the deepest part of the nefesh, where it's completely undefined. Even it doesn't even have the definition that I am me, and therefore I can connect with other people. So that's the vart in the sikh. Right? It's interesting because the one hand we say that the deeper you are to nefesh is the deeper when it's all about you and nobody else. But that's not etzem. The vart is me and not affected by anybody else. But when I reach the deepest part of me, where it's completely undefined, that has no hagdara whatsoever. So when there's no hagdara, then there's even that hagdara that it's me is also it's also already hagdara. Elamai, it's pshittus, and mitzad that pshittus, there are no walls whatsoever. That's how undefined the pnimius of the etzem nefesh is. That's the vart in the sikh. So how do we see the way the sikha works? The sikha works saying that be'etzem all the koiches on some level have this pshittus of etzem nefesh. The question is how mufshit, how, and I'm not going to go through all the arichs in the city. You'll see in Sif, you get to Nefesh Adam, you see it starts from Sif Ches and on, the level of pshittus that exists in Midas, the level of pshittus that exists in Seichel, and the ultimate pshittus that exists in Dibur. So that's all the different layers of pshittus that the nefesh has, that the koiches have, are because it's an etzem nefesh. But because they're not mamish mushish in the etzem, in other words, the etzem doesn't express itself completely as it is in that koyach, so it's mugbal. Dibur expresses etzem nefesh b'shleis, and therefore the pshittus of etzem nefesh expresses itself in Dibur. In the Maimer, it says it a bit differently. So first of all, the first yisoid where it's mamish different is he makes a clear divide between the koiches and nefesh, Dibur, midas, etc., and seichel midas versus Dibur. That they take do not express the etzem, and Dibur does. Or not that it's progressive, it's a revolution. There's a complete change. This is nish, this is yet. Why? Because this is giloyim and this is etzem. Why do they not express the etzem and nefesh? Because they express the nefesh. If you're expressing the nefesh, then you're not expressing etzem and nefesh. The moment you're an expression, then you're always expression. You're an expression, so you're not. So you're a giloyim. You're not. Why? Because the fact that I look at midas of a person and seichel of a person, and I have epis ha'akara in who the person is. So what's niskala here is that part of the nefesh that can be expressed. So you have a good friend, and you have many conversations with them, and you learn with them, and you even discuss feelings, versteht sich, and all that, right? So you get to know the seichel and the midas, and you're knowing the person more and more and more and more. So Chassidus comes and says, no. Yeah, you're knowing deeper and deeper. But in a way, you're getting further and further from that etzem. Why? Because you know him. And if you know him, it's not him. Why? Because etzem nefesh is behel. Right? So, and here's the difference in that vart, where in the sikha, what's the etzem nefesh? Etzem nefesh is pshittus, the lack of hagdara. Even a place where there's no human, where there's no me, it leaves the oilam katan zeh adam. It leaves the what's the shintanya, the ear. It leaves that city, goes into a different city, different shetach. So there's complete lack of boundaries. That's where the etzem nefesh is in skala. Here we're saying etzem nefesh is behela. Etzem nefesh, you know where it's expressed? Where it's not expressed. So dafke dibur, so that's the word in the Maimer by us. How is dibur mivata etzem nefesh, or what's lashon siftes? Vi drikt sich eis. Nirgash ba hashoyrish lo b'pnimis hakeser. Where is nirgash? The previous, where is nirgash etzem nefesh in dibur?
that you don't see the human being, that you don't see me there. I'm not in my dibur, right? Technically, you take my voice, play around with the voice, and someone else could, you're not going to know anything about me from the dibur. The fact that you don't know me, that's me. That's my nefesh. So here you see the Rebbe's biyurim, so the Rebbe, so it's not just, I have to say that dibur comes from very deeply, and that's also why previously, in the other mamarim, not by the Rebbe's mamarim, we don't have to go to etzem. We're just proving a point. The fact that you see that dibur brings deeper seichel and midas and brings a person to a heightened sense of sensitivity and expression shows that it comes from a deeper part of the nefesh. But here we're explaining, we're saying what is the shaykhs of dibur to that level. And you know what? So once you start looking at the connection of dibur to that space, so what are we talking about? We're talking about etzem, because etzem drikt sich eis in pshittus, and etzem drikt sich eis in hella. Yeah? So everyone's scared to speak. Dibur is a scary, I don't know. Okay, say it there.